This land is your land. This land is my land. And up on here, we're going to put a radar. Yeah, exactly. There's my little antenna dish. Okay? Now, if you remember growing up, well, in my generation growing up, we always just see the TV shows. And whenever you'd have sort of some kind of science show, there'd always be a cutaway shot to a radar going around. And like the $6 Million Man, there'd always be something then going to a radar shot. Back then, we used to chloroform everybody on TV. Back then, all the bad guys, there was no violence. You just chloroform them. You just put a little white thing, and they just faint. Remember this? You guys didn't get this. You guys don't even probably know what chloroform is because you were devoid of chloroform on TV. Chloroform was in every show growing up. Okay, so there you go, chloroform and radars. This is back in the day, and this is your radar. And here is yeah, that's right, jet airplane flying along. Let's put some flames here just to really give it some special effects. Okay, so here's the deal. I have a plane perhaps coming into my land and your land over here, and we want to detect this plane. Now, typically, jet airliners, we know where they are. They tell us, by the way, I'm flying in your friendly skies. Here's your captain. We're right over Michigan. Everybody knows where they are. They try not to hide. Okay? In fact, they want to be very visible so that nobody else runs into them. However, maybe this is a plane, and you want to detect this, and it's a fighter jet. And so here's the idea with the radar. What you're going to do is send out, typically, microwaves, radio waves, out into space with, let's say, some frequency omega naught. Okay? And the idea is you just send it out there to space, and when it hits an object, it bounces off. So this is all omega naught bouncing off this airplane. Your objective is you're sitting over here on this dish, is whatever gets bounced off back towards here gets picked up by a small portion of what you sent off gets picked up over here. Okay, so you send off a pretty strong signal in hopes of getting a small return of this omega naught. And if something came back, then you know bounced off something. Okay? Now typically you know that maybe there's a mountain over here, maybe there's a lake here, it's very beautiful, some nice trees. Put the trees where you like them. Do you remember that? We grew up on that too, the guy who does the art on MTV. No? Okay, some of you know that reference. This is a cultural learning class, and clearly you guys need it. All right. So the idea is you have all this stuff that's going to give off the standard signature. So you can kind of in some sense say, I can subtract that out. And what I'm looking for is, in addition to this, do I get anything else back? Okay? So that is the idea of the radar. Now here's the problem. So for instance, over here on this land camping is Erica. Okay, and she's camping with Maria. And you know they're in the great outdoors, but they got cell phones still. And they're talking, calling their mom in New Jersey. They're polluting this whole airspace. So it's just not omega naught that's floating around here. It's all kinds of stuff. There's a little AT&T tower over here for its 3G network that's gotten all kinds of heat. There's stuff everywhere. You pop lots of signal everywhere. So when you detect stuff, it's not like it's this pristine environment. You're picking up full range of electromagnetic spectrum. Okay? And all you want to do is figure out, I'm bouncing off something, and I want to detect this thing. So I want enough signal to do this. Okay? But within all the stuff that I read in is this whole array of electromagnetic energy. And I've got to figure out how to take care of that. All right? Now, that's your perspective sitting over here. Now, let's talk about the perspective of you being up here in this airplane. And you want to go undetected. So, what are your options? Well, one option is just to not fly in this space. That's option one, stay home. But suppose, okay, you don't have that options. You've got to go flying here. So what do? Well, what if I built this plane out of materials that absorb omega naught? crazy idea. Not really, right? This is stealth technology. The whole idea is you put this special material on, so when a meganaut hits it, it just gets absorbed instead of rebounding. The whole premise is that this thing here relies on the reflection. If there is no reflection, there's no detection. Okay, so you try to absorb as much as omega naught as possible. Okay, that's one. Two, how do I build a plane that has very few reflections to begin with? For instance, I can design the plane where all the edges are very smooth, so that, for instance, I minimize even the amount of reflections off just the geometric surfaces. Okay, again, if you look at these stealth planes, they are just these, like the B bomber wing plane. It's smooth, no corners. They even put the missiles hidden underneath so that there's no reflections off things. Reflections are detections. Do you see that, how it rhymed? I just made that up right then, but I should have been a poet. All right? So there you go. That's one option, is you build the geometry of that plane, and that's a pretty big industry, right? I want to come in here, and I don't want anybody to see me, so I can try to figure out how to stop those reflections from coming back. Or, you're not going to stop all of it, but what you want to do is reduce it to such a level that this guy over here thinks perhaps that you're just a Canadian goose flying in the sky. Maybe you're a pack of geese. Okay? That's what you want this person over to believe you are. You may be armed to the teeth missiles, and you're like a 40-foot-long jet flying in at Mach 5, but you want this guy to think, oh, there's a Canadian goose moving at Mach 5. Okay, all right. We'll talk about picking up speed and so forth in a little bit. So that's what your objective is. Now, another way to handle this is to, fly one of these AWACS planes way up high in the sky. Have you seen these ones? Now, I'm going to talk here, be gender specific for a moment. If you were a boy, potentially you had a book about jet airplanes when you were a kid, and you flipped through that thing, and that was like the coolest thing ever. So it's about 7 or 8 years old. Maybe you did that as a girl too, but I know for a fact we were boys. And there was this airplane, which we always thought was dorky because it didn't look like it could move very fast. It had that little thing on top. What's the whole purpose of that thing on top? In many ways is, again, big picture. It's like, yeah, this guy's trying to read omega naught so he can pick up this stuff here. Why don't I just fly really high, and I'm just going to blast out omega naught everywhere, right? Flood the whole space. So this guy's going to pick up a ton of omega naught, but he's not going to see this one. By basically inundating all the space with all the signal, I can basically fly something at a very small thing through because they go, I flooded the system with omega naught. Is that understandable? It's kind of like a radar jamming issue, right? Now, it's like, yeah, this thing's up, but this thing's 30,000 feet up in the air. This thing here is 200 feet up in the air with missiles. This thing here, I'm not going to launch a missile at it, right? I mean, ultimately, the other part of the story is, with this land is your land and my land, right over here sits, these are missiles. Pretty nice rendition, do you think? And you're going to make a detection, and you're going to have to also make a decision about, hey, should I take one of these and put it over there? Now, if you think it's a Canadian goose, you totally do it. Because if you've walked by the pond, you hate Canadian geese, right? You walk by there, and you step in stuff, and they're mean. Has any of them hissed at you? Who's gotten a goose hissed at the UW before? Okay. So for those of you who are first years, please walk a little closer to them. You'll get the hiss. You'll get the whole experience here at the UW. There you go. Okay. So you would, after that experience, decide, yes, it's a Canadian goose. Launch a missile. Okay. And hopefully there's like 3 or 4 of them. So you can just clean them out all at once. Okay. So that's the radar problem. We're trying to make a decision, ultimately based on, let's say, a low signal to noise ratio. Okay? They're trying to go undetected. You're trying to pull that out. By the way, this problem also holds for, ready? Put on your underwater glasses. There's a lake. It's a really beautiful lake. And in this lake happens to be a Navy submarine. That's how you know it's a submarine, because it's got a periscope. Now, how does a submarine see in this lake? It sends out sonar. And the TV shows, that's always a doo, doo, right? I don't know. I don't know who came up with that sound. Someone in Hollywood, hey, let's make a sonar. So whenever you see a picture of a submarine on TV,